Well, thank you very much. I am delighted to see so many of you here this evening to participate in this program about the enduring Brown versus Board of Education decision. Ivan and Karen, we're delighted to have you participate in this program. Welcome to Westminster, to the Peace and Justice program.
Thank you.
Ivan Henderson is executive director of the Delaware Historical Society and was most recently the director of the Jane Littleton Mitchell Center for African American Heritage and vice president for programming. Prior to doing this in Delaware, he was vice president for programming at the African American Museum in Philadelphia. He was previously curator or director of the education for the university museums at the University of Delaware. Ivan has a BA degree in English from Harvard College and an MA from the Bank Street College of Education in New York. Welcome, Ivan. And Karen, who is a member of the board of directors of the Historical Society, retired, and I hope you're managing it, Karen, better than I'm managing it. I'm telling myself
I'm enjoying my retirement. Thank you.
And I'm not behaving properly, but she's retired from a variety of important positions in Wilmington. She was a legal secretary to Attorney Lewis Redding. She's worked for the city of Wilmington. She's had management positions at Hercules Incorporated and Verizon. She has an undergraduate degree from Goldie Beacom College and is completing her MA degree at the University of Delaware, which the project that's going to be described tonight is a part of it. Karen is very active in the community. She has been president of the Black Women's group Links Incorporated, and is a member of Delta Sigma Theta, and she worships at the Hanover Presbyterian Church. So welcome to you both, and I'll leave it to you to carry on with your presentation, after which we'll have some exchange.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you for having us this evening. Casey Morrison, thank you for extending the invitation. And I'll say, Karen Ingram, thank you for agreeing once I sent you the request. And I'll thank you twice because folks here do not know that you're in the throes of writing and finishing the writing portion of the project that we're here to discuss this evening. So, I don't miss those days, but I wish you, Godspeed in accomplishing the task. So thank you all so much for having us tonight. I apologize for being a couple of minutes late, and so we'll get right into the conversation. This evening, I've asked Karen to indulge me by allowing me to interview her, and I told her we'll interview her in public, and I'll do it as though I'm an interviewer who talks too much. So I'll do a lot of building context with some of the things that lead up to my questions. But really, I want to highlight for you all what's been a very unique experience for me. And it's not over yet, but also in a way, an exemplar of the ways that institutions like ours can serve the broader community. And so, this year, of course, is the 70th anniversary of the Brown versus Board of Education decision. And something that's important to a lot of folks for a lot of reasons. But I asked Karen to start us off today by telling us the significance of this 70th anniversary of that decision, and especially in context of your project.
Okay, my project is a oral bus tour to the sites that are related to the Brown decision. So when I was doing my research, I was looking at Lewis L. Redding. He was my mentor. I worked for Mr. Redding for 5 years during the years of 1968 through 1973. And so he gave me a lot of worth in being a secretary, of being a woman, of being a professional, being a person who has value in the things that she does. And it caused me to be a person who does not accept mediocrity, but also just excellence. So all through my writing, through my courses, it's been about Mr. Redding. And so when I was writing my thesis, my thesis proposal, I was talking with my advisor, Julie McGee. And she says, Karen, why do you want to write another essay on Lewis Redding when you can do a project? So I had already started working on some of the research. And then as my research started to develop, I noticed there was a link. And the link was Lewis L. Redding, who was an attorney. He was the first African-American attorney who practiced law in the state of Delaware from 1929 until he died in 98. And then Mr. Redding had gone to Howard High School, which was a segregated high school for African Americans. And he represented two cases in the Brown decision. One of the cases is Ethel Louise Belton. Ethel Louise Belton was, excuse me, a teenager who lived in Claymont. And she rode the public bus from Claymont to Howard High School every day. And during her day, or during her week in school, for 3 days, she walked to Carver Career Center for her business classes. At Howard High School, she had the academic classes. So her mother was very upset about her being transported to a school that was 10 miles away. When it was a white school, there was Claymont High School. So she was working at the time for Mr. Redding. So Mr. Redding said, let's take this case to court. So they took it to court. But in the meantime, there was a young lady, not a young lady, an infant, whose name is Shirley Barber Bulah, B-U-L-A-H. And she was taken to school by her mother, who lived 2 miles away from this to the school. And she wanted bus transportation for her daughter. Mrs. Bulah sent a letter to the governor, to the Board of Education, and another entity, and they refused her, meaning Shirley, transportation for her to go to school. And the reason was, during that time, there was a law saying that the bus could not pick up colored children to take them to school. So they were both angry. Mrs. Belton and Mrs. Buell were both very angry. So Mr. Redding said, okay, I'm going to file a case in the Chancery Court, and he did. Right. And Chancellor Slates heard the case. And as the case was heard, there were, of course, people who were very upset in the community about, why are you upsetting, the way things are. So Mr. Redding filed the case. Chancellor Seitz heard the case, and they won. Unfortunately, because it was the law that the white people did not want colored people to ride the schools or integrate the schools. They filed a claim or litigation against the state. So Mr. Redding, he was also an attorney for the NAACP, was recruited by Thurgood Marshall, who was the national, he was the leader in the NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund in New York. And so they had gathered some lawyers from different parts of the country to join in the litigation. And this litigation was heard after 2 years, after it was filed. After 2 years, it was a unanimous decision that the school should be integrated. So that's why we're celebrating May 17th, 2024 as the 70th anniversary.
Now, thank you for that background, Karen. Now, again, you're a student, a master's student at Osher Lifelong Learning Institute, but also a student, and therefore a student at University of Delaware. One of the places that you already mentioned where you began to think about this and maybe even had a seed that made you think about creating a project around this piece of history was in the Race and Museums course at University of Delaware. From what I know of that course and the person leading it, the years I knew, Julie McGee, was that, this is a very high level education for social justice, right? But there's an opportunity through that course to understand how culture can affect our experiences in museums and in cultural institutions, both our experiences as visitors, but also the curatorial angle, the work that they do to design the experience for you. But also I perceive that course as a place where you think critically about how race, culture, ethnicity should and should not affect the experience. And so something I think is a valuable piece of anyone's education. But can you talk a little bit more about the influence of that course on the way that you're thinking about this project?
Well, it wasn't just that course. It was numerous courses because when I was taking classes at the University of Delaware, most of my classes centered around African American subjects. And the reason that is because I am from an area in New Jersey where I did not have to think about color. I didn't have to think about, I'm African American or I'm Black or I'm colored and I can't do this and I can't do that. And the only way I knew about being the only way I knew about segregation is when I came to Delaware, and I heard people talking about they weren't able to go to Rehoboth Beach, and weren't able to go to certain stores, they weren't able to eat in restaurants, they weren't able to go to a certain hospital because they were colored or because they were Black, and transportation. And so that was all new to me. And because I worked in corporate America, my discussions with other people did not focus on Black and white. But Dr. McGee opened my eyes in the race in museums because I did see there was a lot of racism in the country, and there's a Black issue and there's a white issue, and unfortunately I don't see color, and I hope I don't. I don't think I see color, but there are a lot of things that people will say that are very hurtful, and I don't want to see um, the story of Mr. Redding not be told in its entirety, because Mr. Redding and the Brown case. What's that? Somebody say something? I didn't want Mr. Redding's case, Mr. Redding or the Brown case, to have a negative impact on the society. That's why I wanted to write my narrative for the tour so that people can read about it and also do the tour, and hopefully it will be sustainable, because there's a lot of things that people should know about, the Reddings and the challenges and the influences that these cases had in changing the history of the United States.
Thank you for that, Karen. And everyone, I'm having serious power issues over here. So I'm not doing a cliffhanger here, but thank you, Karen. I caught the beginning and end of your response. I'll confess to everyone that I worked between 2012 and 2016 as the curator of education for University Museums at University of Delaware. My next door neighbor, literally, while I was on that team, was Julie McGee, who's the professor who leads the Race and Education course. After working at University of Delaware, while I was still working at African American Museum in Philadelphia, and even here at the Mitchell Center, I've been a guest to the Race and Museums course, and had an opportunity to meet folks like Karen through that course. But again, it's a rare opportunity to have somebody like Karen emerge from the students you meet in a single day or a single semester with something of substance that'll help me at work, while it also helps them with their studies. So, I thought this was a unique opportunity. Um, One thing that Karen talks about um, in her writing about this project, but also we speak about from the beginning, is that, you know, a great opportunity presents itself every now and then. The best opportunities present themselves in ways that are sustainable and perhaps replicable. That, what's good to do today is probably something that we'll want to do for multiple audiences multiple times in the future. And in fact, very few of our programs should be designed as one-off unless there's just really a truly one-time event occurring. And so with Karen, there is this opportunity for sustainability through the first time that we run this tour and this half-day experience. But also, we're at the 70th anniversary of Brown versus Board. And so there's also this opportunity to look at these ideas over and over again, repeatedly, at important intervals. I'm sure the conversation will kick back up in 2029 as well, around the 75th, and then 25 years after that. And so if we're thinking sustainably, we want to think about how to introduce this experience and this learning opportunity for folks this year, and at the same time, how this might evolve, how it might grow, how it might serve multiple audiences over the course of multiple years. And so it's also been one of the most important parts of thinking with Karen. So for the Historical Society of Delaware, for Delaware Historical Society, and by extension, the Jane and Littleton Mitchell Center for African American Heritage, we've already defined strategic priorities that should be guiding us this year and straight up through 2026 through our strategic plan. And so I won't, one of the screens I'm not sharing with you is a really exciting graphic about our strategic plan, but I will read to you 4 of our 6 strategic priorities. And the 4 are the real action priorities. The other 2 are around our growth with technology and fundraising. So I definitely won't bore you with those. But we, of course, in general terms, speak about strengthening our organization to improve the culture and effectiveness, the ways we are perceived, and the ways we perceive other folks and treat them. Our second goal is around maintaining and improving the historic properties and collections. All the 3 million pieces of objects in the 9 buildings that make up the Historical Society. However, it's the third and fourth goals that I thought were particularly addressed by the project that Karen proposed. We seek to engage a broader audience across the state and beyond. And again, not deal in the same topics and not miss opportunities to catch on to unique commemorative events such as the 70th anniversary of Brown versus Board or Delaware 250 as part of USA 250. And of course, our fourth goal is refining our programs and events for greater impact, which is, of course, very general and very vague, but something that I believe we're achieving through this program. We, like all institutions, or all cultural institutions who relied on in-person visitation, are still rebounding from the effects of having ourselves cut off from our audiences, and having people cut off from having gatherings in the ways that museums would love for them to. So this project, this spring and this summer, gives us an opportunity to both engage with folks around new topics or with new experiences around topics that we've explored before in multiple ways, but also represents a refinement of what we can offer to draw people out to in-person experiences. One thing you'll notice is that we don't actually come to the Delaware Historical Society, the History Museum, or any of our sites for this version of the tour. However, being able to facilitate this and organize this represents service to the community at a time when they would be interested and are expressing interest in such a topic. So for us, it's a great opportunity and something we couldn't pass up. Of course, there's the Brown versus Board anniversary this summer that I mentioned already. The 70th anniversary is not the same as the 75th, but I believe the tracks we laid this year and the style of conversation that we're trying to produce through this program this year can build a new sort of trust and a new expectation in the audiences we serve. Again, for multiple years to come, and definitely up through the 75th anniversary of Brown versus Board. But Karen, I wanted to ask you to go into a little bit of detail and describe the stops that we will make on this tour. Let folks know where we'll be and where our sort of fellowship luncheon will occur and why.
Okay. So we will start at the Lois L. Redding childhood home, which is on 11th Street. It's been there for a number of years, since 1997. It was located originally on 10th Street. There was a former partner of Lois Redding who decided that instead of having it demolished by the MBNA bank, that it would be saved and be used as a museum. So the state moved it to the 11th Street site. And so the house or the museum has most of the furniture that was in the Redding home when they were living there. They do have some added pieces like china and other things like that, but they have the same piano and the furniture, which was reupholstered by the prisoners in at Delaware Correctional Center, and it's very, very lovely. So that's our first stop. And the second stop will be at Howard High School. Howard High School has been around since 1927. It was one of the schools that Pierre S. DuPont built for African American students. And we will visit the memorabilia room and also the auditorium and other places on the first floor. That building is, excuse me, very well maintained. I was there in January, and it's just beautiful. The auditorium, they have the original seats, and so that dates back to 1927, and it's a well polished, well groomed, well maintained school. And I met the principal. His name is Dr. Kyle Hill. And he was willing, I mean, he was just overly excited about being a partner in our quest for this tour. And so he has offered the parking lot for us to park the cars, and it will be locked until we come back from the tour. I had asked the city of Wilmington if we could lease a bus, and I should tell you this story first. I was going to hire or lease a commercial bus, and then I thought that would not be appropriate because the students that we're talking about, Belton and Beulah, they could not ride the bus. So I decided that I would ask for a bus. And I looked at different bus companies, and they were really expensive. And so I called the city of Wilmington, and the city of Wilmington said, it sounds like you're going to 2 different places outside the city, and we only travel in the city. But she would call her supervisor. Her supervisor said yes, that she would allow the bus to take us from Reading House to Howard High School, and then drive up to Claymont. And then from Claymont, we will go to Hocassett Color School 107C. So once we leave Howard High School, we will go to Claymont High School. It's now a community center, and it's a very vibrant community center. And that's where Ethel Belton was not able to go when she was in going to school. And I must say that during the course of the litigation with Brown versus Board of Education, and also Belton versus the Board of Education, she did not graduate from Claymont High School. The decision came on May 20. No, I'm sorry. The decision was May 17th, 1954. She was only 2 weeks away from graduating. So she did not go to Claymont High School. So after we leave Claymont, they have a memorabilia room, and then they have I meant to say that each place that we go to will have a docent. The docent will tell us what the site's importance, and also anything else that they might want to share. So they have 30 minutes to tell the guests. what happened at the at that site, and also the importance. So when we leave the Claymont High School, we go to the Hocassin Color School 107C, and they have, it's a beautiful state-of-the-art building. It used to be a one room school where they had 6 grades, and they received books that were tattered, worn, missing pages from the white schools. And so when the case of Beulah versus the Board of Education and Beulah versus Board of Education, it was the idea for Chancellor Seiss to go to the schools to see whether or not they were equal. And I didn't mention anything about being equal, but he knew that these color schools were not equal to the white schools. So he ruled in favor of the Black schools, or the Black plaintiffs, because they should be protected under the law to go to a the school of their choice. So that's why the cases were filed. So we will have lunch. It's going to be a catered lunch at the 107C, and everything has been beautifully planned, I guess, by God, because when I was looking for a caterer, and the caterer's food was really delicious, so I asked the caterer if I could have her card, and she said, "Oh yes, I'll give you my card." And I looked at the card, and her address is the same place where Ethel Belton lived. This is a coincidence. It's such a coincidence. I mean, everything is just running together, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful project.
No, I think that's a great point. One of the, I've been doing museum programming for 20 years, and one of the things I learned was to leave space to be nimble, and to leave space for, things to work out in the end. I truly believe that the best answers reveal themselves. And so, Karen and I have spoken, and I was getting worried about that we hadn't chosen a caterer until the right one showed up, at our doorstep. When you are trying to implement sustainable practice, and build sustainable community relationships, those little victories can mean a lot. Every step of the day, at this point, is curated with intention. And imagine if we had locked ourselves into some adequate but not perfect relationship early on in the planning. I can say that's the case across the board. When Karen talks about getting the school bus that will look like the school bus that passed by children at some point, it's an act of justice that we all ride on this bus, and it's not an act of comfort. We could have got a more comfortable vehicle, and so we're choosing to ride on those shocks for 4 or 5 hours together, and think, put context to the experience. Not quite in situ, but it is a design piece that I appreciate. Karen is also, and I know we've got a few minutes left, is a member of our board of trustees, and is a relatively new member. And so, Karen, I just wanted to ask you, why you joined the Board of Trustees at the Delaware Historical Society. This project brought you to us as a student, but I also come to you for advice. So why did you join our board?
Well, because Stephen Kingsbury asked me. Well, I was telling Sue earlier, but she wanted to know, she asked me the same question, and I think it's because I think I have a lot to offer the community, and since I'm involved in different organizations and I know a lot of people, and I'm a person who wants to see things not done right, but I like to see things. Okay, the Delaware Historical Society is doing the right thing, and I think it's because they are working with a diverse population, and I like that. I think because Stephen Kingsbury, who is African American, Ivan Henderson, who is also an African American. I think that's a good team because you're thinking about the other segments of the population, and that's what I like. I like diversity, and I think that you're doing, great. Not you personally, but I think the Delaware Historical Society is doing a great job in performing the mission that you had set out to do.
Thank you for that. And again, in the interest of time, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit in our conversation because I think you talked about already some of the things we wanted to. But I'll go back and reference one of the things you just mentioned. And I do, if we can be a little loose for the last couple minutes here. Karen mentioned Stephen Kingsbury, and Stephen and I talk about this all the time. The fact that we don't talk about it, that he is the first African American chair of our board, and I'm the first African American executive director at Delaware Historical Society. I believe contextually, and especially beyond today, if we do our jobs and do them well, in a sense, that is the Black history that needs to be made by our presence in these roles. I have to be good at my job and be excellent at it. I also happen to be, an African American man. And so I'm aware of, what I represent. I know Stephen is, and I know it's not a thing that we run around talking about. We want our work to speak for itself. And I would love for our identities to map onto whatever successes we have. And so it's a pleasure working with Karen, and it's something that we're also very careful about. But listen, she didn't do it tonight, but every time Karen speaks about her personal experiences with Lewis Redding, she's speaking about a young person who's with a community leader, who's a leader for folks beyond his family, and who is taking under his wing individuals, and using, the levers at his disposal to change lives, and to help them imagine better ways of living and better ways of being. Um, Karen is a product of that type of love and attention. It's the reason that, 70 years after the Brown versus Board decision, this is the culminating project for her master's thesis. And something I respect and admire. But I can tell you all personally and professionally that once I met Karen and began to speak to her about this project, she began to remind me of people that I've known over the years, folks who have taken special attention in me when I was in middle school and in high school, and made sure that I understood there was a standard that they could identify for me. And if I wanted to, I could try to align myself with that standard for achievement, the way I work, the way I treat people, the way I socialize. And so she literally reminds me of my guidance counselors from growing up. And I told her earlier today, I couldn't imagine seeing them both in the same room. They're so much alike. Um, Karen, in addition to being this member on our board of trustees, who leads our efforts and our conversations on a governance level around diversity, equity, and inclusion, she's also a person who, I say, weaves her directive into her requests or her questions. She lets you know what she expects of the Mitchell Center and of the Historical Society from the example that she's witnessed of individuals like Lewis Redding, just through our casual conversations. And so once I began speaking with Karen, I understood that we had an opportunity to engage with an individual who could help us elevate the Mitchell Center and amplify its message to a high level. But again, I could trust right away because she reminds me of every person who's pushed me hard in positive ways over the decades I've been working in museums and even before that. And so, that's something that we don't plan for in the project, but it's one of the things that allows me to open my ears and listen to Karen very early on and understand that this project is something we could do. So Karen, I wanted to ask you quickly about what it took to get this work funded, because we're, renting a bus, we're taking 40 to 50 people around to historic sites on a historic weekend. We're providing, a nice meal with a meaning. and also engaging them with scholars and historians throughout the tour, docents at every site. Who did you go to help get this covered? And also, what are our next steps?
I've been in Delaware for over 50 some years, so I know a lot of people. And so one of the one of my contacts was Senator Margaret Rose Henry, and she mentioned to me that she really thought the project was a excellent way to bring about the knowledge of the Brown versus Board of Education story. But she says, Karen, why don't you call or contact Dick Carter at the Delaware Heritage Commission? So I did, and he asked me to come down to the meeting on March 6th. And I went to the meeting. He says, Karen, if you come down to the meeting, although you asked for X number of dollars, maybe you can get more. So I went into the meeting, and they were talking about other things that they were doing. And then it came to my turn to talk about the project. And instead of giving me what I asked for, they gave me a lot more money. And then with the Delaware Humanities Commission, we didn't think that we were going to get the money that we asked for. It was a lot of wondering what we could use the money for, like for meals and for transportation and so forth. And so I was talking with my church member. A lot of you may know who my church member is. He's not a licensed photographer, but he's a photographer, and he's going to do the photography for the project on that Saturday for just for lunch. He's not going to charge me anything. And then there's someone who's going to, my insurance agent. My insurance agent, he asked me if he could come on the tour. And I said, I don't know, because we have to advertise the tour. He said, well, if I can't go, then I'm going to donate snacks for everybody. I mean, this is my brand new insurance agent. He was just so enthusiastic about the project. So he's donating the snacks. And then of course we have other in-kind services. So we have just about all of the money that we need for the project, because we asked for it.
I think that's a great point. And I would say your ambassadorship, both around the Historical Society and the Mitchell Center in general, but around this project has been crucial. Again, not every project would have a champion who's telling everyone they know about what's going on. But also, I would say not everyone has a project that everyone they know would be interested in supporting either. So it's been I've had tougher things to raise money for. I'll say that. So we have to get through this first event. This is a pilot event. I mentioned that I believe this is sustainable practice through the 75th anniversary. We are still living in the context of House Bill 198. And so, this version that we're doing this may be tailored to offer continuing education credits and professional development for teachers across the state in future iterations. We may offer this up in a seasonal way for cultural heritage tourism. But this is sustainable practice if we put our minds to it. So I want to get this first one done and reflect upon it. Also, Hockessin 107C and Howard High are examples of DuPont sites, but there's a burgeoning and growing DuPont Schools network. So not every site in the DuPont Schools network, of course, is related to the Brown versus Board case in the national park sense. Yet they are part of the reality that all African Americans in this state faced. And so there may be opportunities to create other iterations of this tour where we go to the Buttonwood School and still go by the national park sites and still explain, the transition from DuPont Schools networks to the slow integration of other schools here in Delaware. And so I think there's other resources. and other opportunities available to us, not only to try this one and reflect upon it, but to refine it to serve broader communities, maybe even get out of Newcastle County and serve other parts of Delaware with this, along with what we can do in virtual settings if we record these things or choose to digitize any aspect of the experience. However, I have to say this time by design, it's all in person. This is us getting together on a bus and something that we're really looking forward to doing. So Karen, I'll ask you one final question. Why does Brown versus Board and that decision still matter to us today? And why is this tour important for us to take today in 2024?
Well, I think it's a valuable lesson for everybody. It's not just African American history. It's American history, and I think because HB 198 is a mandate that says that all schools, public and charter, should have a curriculum that has African American subjects. And I think through the years, I think eventually we will not have to talk about race. We will not have to talk about, the Browns case, as we could say, it integrated the schools. And I hope that with this project, it will be a lesson for everybody because it has a meaning. It's been a true meaning for me because I'm honoring the man who gave me my professional skills, and I certainly do appreciate it. I'm doing it in his honor.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you so much for sharing over these months, but also thank you for sharing tonight. I'll stop there and ask folks if there are any questions or any responses or anything for us. But thanks for having us.
Well, thank you both very much for very rich discussion about an innovative program. We all look forward to it. So tell us, are you looking to have a defined audience for the pilot program, or is this just going to be open to anyone who sort of signs up, so to speak?
Well, may I answer this?
Yes.
Okay, so there are some parameters of getting the money from the Delaware Heritage Commission and also the Delaware Humanities Commission. And so we have to put it on their websites to offer it to people who, for the public. And so we will have those people that we will, have as people who are visiting. And I don't think we mentioned this, but it's no charge. It's free for everybody. Mm-hmm. And so if we don't have, a lot of people who want to come through those two entities, then of course, we'll have a guest list because we have to invite, people who are from the Reading House, people from Howard High School, people from Claymont, people from Hocassin 107C, and probably, the Delaware Historical Society may want to have some staff. And the bus only seats 48 people. And so there may be an opportunity for people to just drive their cars from point A to point B, point C, and point D, but they will not hear the narrative that is being given by the historian. So they will be able to sign up for lunch at the 107C, but the bus only holds 48 people.
Sounds like I already hear tour number 2, tour number 3,
yeah. And my minister said, why don't you have another bus? Well, the tour itself is going to be close to 4 hours long, so we couldn't have another bus because that would be too long of a day.
Well, I imagine there's going to be great interest in this. I'd love to hear you talk about working with Mr. Redding, but let's go on to questions from some others in the audience, and if we have time, I'd really like to have you talk about that.
Could I ask a question?
Laura.
I see. I'm looking at the website for the Reading House, and it looks like you can take a virtual tour of the house. Is it overseen, is it managed also by the Historical Society? Or is it completely separately overseen and budgeted and managed by by the foundation I see that exists?
Yeah, it's managed by the foundation and it's owned by the foundation. And the two of them do not have an affiliation.
Right. I will say by chance, by serendipity, the outreach and programming coordinator for the Mitchell Center at the Historical Society is also on the board at the Reading House. So it's
Okay, so
just
there's some
there's
connection.
a little behind the scenes understanding, I'll say, of how to work with the Reading House.
And is there other programming that exists for the Reading House, or is it you know, kind of strictly open through this through virtually or by invitation, or is there other programming that exists through the Reading House? Or
They do have they do have visitors only by appointment. They will have a mock trial competition there in May. And sometimes they have meetings there, but it's not advertised. If you know somebody and if that person knows that there's an available date for a tour or for a meeting, then the Reading House will be accommodating. But it's not really open to the public.
And Laura, I think that's a great question. Claymont Community Center is Claymont Community Center and very active, and as well as Howard High School. You know, it's still a high school, but so much more. Reading House and 107C, Hocus and 107C are places for which I think sustaining this sort of activity is one of their goals. They want to open their doors to more folks and tell their stories to more folks. And so part of us thinking about this as potentially sustainable practice is talking to those partners and saying, hey, do you have an appetite to do this once or twice a year? Is there a teaching function that you all want to satisfy with this type of activity? And of course, the answer is a resounding yes. So we do get to generate a little bit of good activity within their core function areas that we all, you know, as separate institutions want to see happen. So we get to serve that a little bit of a purpose as well. Karen, you have a question from a special guest here, Stephen Kingsbury. How does it feel to be a living part of history and working with Mr. Reading, which is, I think, one of Casey Morrison's questions as well.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I was 19 years old when I started working for Mr. Reading. I had no idea the magnitude of the man. He did not express to me, or did he talk about his being not famous, but his involvement in the Brown case, or his prominence in the Brown case. And if I got a phone call from Chancellor Seitz, if I got a phone call from, say, a Thurgood Marshall, I didn't know who he was. And so I was very privileged to have spoken to those folks. And Mr. Reading, he had so many people who were coming into his office, like Littleton and Jane Mitchell. They were one of his best friends. I mean, they were his best friends. And Mr. Reading has 3 daughters, and it was just like I just loved the way he talked to his daughters. Mr. Reading was married twice, and I never met the first wife, but I knew the second wife. And we had a was it two? He had an office, and I had my office, and then he was a preceptor to several young men who wanted to be attorneys. And so, of course, Mr. Reading was very, very, I don't want to use the word strict, but he did not accept mediocrity. He expected excellence, and that's why I am the way I am today. So he has, Casey, did you know Mr. Reading?
No,
Casey,
no,
did you not? No,
no.
you did not. Okay. Um, he one of the things he did was I didn't understand it until later in life, and he used to have a cigarette in his mouth all the time, and I couldn't understand why. He didn't chew it, he didn't smoke it, but I think he was just trying to kick the habit. So he would walk down the street with a cigarette in his hand, I mean, in his mouth, and he had when I was doing part of my research, um, he had at one time what's that disease? Leukemia. And so his father, who was very instrumental in the children and the siblings and Mr. Redding's siblings and himself, of course, he said we have to help Lewis. I don't know what he called him, Lewis or Lou, whatever. But he said Lewis is in the hospital in Philadelphia, and we have to man his office. So it was Gwendolyn and Lillian and Jay Saunders. Jay Saunders is a well-known author and professor. And so they were able to keep Lewis Redding's office alive until he came back. So they would type the paper, Lou Redding would type dictate the paper, dictate the whatever it was to the person taking the notes. And then they would take the final copy to Redding's office and he would sign it. And then they would file it. But it was like he never left. And there were so many different things that I can remember with Mr. Redding that made me think about what a wonderful person he is. And through my adult life, I hear people talking about Lewis Redding, and there is a dormitory at the University of Delaware, and it's been there since I guess 2016 or 2015. And I had a student in my class, and she said, you know, people walk into the Redding dormitory. It's the Lewis Redding. It's called the Lewis L. Redding Honors Dormitory. They live there, but they don't know who he is. So after the tour on May 18th, which is our tour, I'm going to do a video so that they can know who Mr. Redding is. So they can have it, have it roll like every 15. I don't know how many times it will roll, but they'll know about Mr. Redding.
Yeah, I was stunned when in one of my classes at the University of Delaware had honor students, and they said, "I'm living in Reading Hall," and I said, "Oh, I had no clue."
No clue, no clue.
And that is, in some ways, the importance of what you're doing here with this tour is to provide this information for a generation of people who may not be aware of it. We're at that magical time, but Marge has had her hand up and wanted to ask a question.
Yes, thank you. I really want to say what a wonderful thing it is that your mentor or who your advisor talked you into doing a project for this, because this is such an incredible experience for people to have. And I just think there's so many people right here in Delaware that don't even know Delaware was part of the board, the Brown versus Board of Education case. So this is really important, and I'm thrilled with your work here. I think you just answered part of my question. I think you said this tour was going to happen on May something.
May 18th, the day after the official date. Yes.
Yeah. And I have a lot of questions about that too, but I heard about, trying to sustain this. So are you thinking that this would be something through the Historical Society, that this tour could keep going? People could arrange for it, or they would provide it throughout the years, or how? Other than this one tour, what is the plan? Or
Thank
is
you for
there
that.
a plan?
Yes,
Okay.
again, we wanna build this to be sustainable. I would imagine in seasons ahead or in years ahead, we can run this 2 or 3 times a year while the weather permits. And so I think probably around May is probably the time to do it anyway, and sort of be out of rainy season, and maybe wrap up early fall every year. I've spoken to the partners at all of the sites we're going to this time. They all have an appetite to repeat this as requested or as needed. So in my mind, I'm very linear. I would pick 3 dates and plan 3 experiences and be able to say these are your 2025 opportunities to take this tour. A more responsive institution, which I hope to be a part of, might say we'll set a few on a calendar, but we'll also arrange them by demand or by request. That's a little more complicated, but I'd say an idea I would entertain. And again, we Claymont Community Center, I think, is a node on this stop on this journey. I believe Howard High School and the Reading House and Museum can always be stops on this journey. But I'm thinking about the DuPont schools, those schools that African Americans attended prior to being able to go to integrated schools. There's a wonderful history and a wonderful network of those. And that'll give us an opportunity to offer versions of this tour, but also some variety. Again, maybe we don't go to 107C, maybe we go to Buttonwood, or maybe we head to Kent and Sussex County. For me, the half-day excursion gives us enough hours to travel together, to commune together, and to reflect. And something we want to try to replicate with tiny differences for as many seasons as possible. I hope that answers your question.
So going forward, if people were, I know you want a targeted audience for this first tour, but going forward, would people contact the Historical Society for this, if to see what's going on, or what? What would we do?
If we're doing our job properly, it'll be listed seasonally well in advance, and you'll see the calendar listing. And if you all are on our mailing lists, you'll get all the communications about the May 18th tour literally within the next couple days. And so folks will be notified that way. But we also have gotten a little bit better about how we promote programs to folks who are not even on our mailing lists. So wherever people receive their news, especially digitally, will be the opportunity for us to add ourselves to other folks' newsletters, social media, our website, and other e-blasts.
The other thing we talked about too is, I think it's called the Greater Wilmington Visitor Center.
Yes.
Yes, there are a lot of people who are coming into Wilmington, and they might want to know if there is an African American museum, or is there a tour to those places, and then they could say, yes, there is one. You could call, this number, and they could arrange a tour for you. But yeah, there are lots of possibilities. And the one thing that really bothered me when I was doing my research, I did not say, and I meant to say this, that my initial plan was to revitalize the Reading House, because it was not being used as I thought it should be. So then I thought, it was going to take me years to do that. So I can't do it by myself. And I have to have the concurrence by the board, to do this. So I decided to make that pivot change and a pivotal change, and do what I'm doing now. But yeah, there's a lot of potential out there for this tour, and I think there's a lot of interest. And one of the colleagues of Dr. McGee, who is an instructor or professor for teachers, she wants the program to be offered to aspiring teachers, so they can teach their children when they want to become teachers, take them on the tour. And then, of course, law students, they might want to know about the Brown decision and how did that start. I want to see the places where, Brown High School, I mean, not Brown, but Howard High School and Claymont and 107C. So there's a lot of potential out there.
Yeah.
A lot.
And I just want to add one quick thing. We are by design also offering honoraria to the sites. Not everything's about money. At the same time, we can't ask folks to replicate effort over and over again without understanding a little bit of what's in it for them. And then some of these places, this is paying bills, keeping lights on, making it so that we can create free programs through a few $100 or $1,000 honoraria repeated over and over again. And so I'm thinking about the creative economy and the cultural economy that goes with this. And that is also part of an equity narrative that we want to sustain.
Well, thank you both very much. This has been a very rich program, and Ivan, we are watching the wonderful schedule of things you're doing at the Historical Society. You are always welcome, as I've mentioned to you, to come and share those with us in the peace and justice effort. So this is, we hope, just the first of what will be other opportunities for you to come and tell us about things you're doing. Parenthetically, the Peace and Justice Group had a program at the Hockessin Colored School. Was it last year, Sue or Sandy?
It was. Sandy was our guiding light. Go ahead, Sandy.
Yeah, we had a in-person class. It was our first in-person class, and we met there and heard presentations in the beautiful facility that they now have. And at least 2 years ago, we heard from people from the Hockessin Colored School even before it was completed. We heard about the project, and so it's been near and dear to our hearts all the way along.
Oh,
We heard from students who were there in the school in the 30s. We celebrated the 100th birthday of one of the students from the school.
Was Beulah? Was it Beulah? Oh, what's her name? I forgot her name.
No.
I'm blanking on her name, but she was
me too. Oh gosh.
And we're hoping to have more programs focused there, either presented by the Center for Diversity, Equity, and Social Justice, or perhaps by our group using that facility. There's no question that personal connection, the experience of a place, the hearing the stories, is what is the most powerful educational aspect of the work. So I will tell you, when Casey announced that we were going to have this program this evening, and I asked for the date, and I thought, oh, great. So that night I can sign up for the tour. So I guess I need to wait a little bit, but I'm sure it's something that would engage many people, either who already know a little bit about this or who have known nothing at all. So I commend you. Thank you, Karen, and thank you, Ivan, for your work in making all of this come to reality.
And by the way, the person who led our program was Dr. Lynette Edwards.
Oh, Edwards, yes, Lynette Edwards.
She wrote a book about the Hockessin Colored School number 107 and the case.
Right.
All right, Sue, you will close us out.
Well, indeed, again, thank you all for being here. We announced at the very beginning that our program next week will feature Kevin O'Connell, who is the chief defender in the state of Delaware, which means that he heads the public defender's office. And the topic will be Killing in the Name of Justice, a history of capital punishment in Delaware, and stories that Kevin will share about his interactions with people involved in the criminal justice system and death row. And there is a bill currently in front of the Delaware legislature. It just came out of committee on March 24th that seeks to abolish the death penalty in the state of Delaware. So we think the program next week will be very timely and enlightening, and hope that you will join us.
Thank you all.
Good night, all.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you again.
And please
Thank
think of
you.
our sites as a place together in the future, please. Really nice to meet you all.
Wonderful.
Good night.
Good night.